Earlier today, patch 1.2.4 released for Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. This being about a 6GB download on Steam and including a variety of changes, but most notably a new hardcore mode that you could access in-game. But even beyond that, there's definitely a few other very important changes from this one. And this new hardcore mode has a bit more than I was expecting. Right at the bat, a bunch will be different in this mode. To access hardcore, you'll need to start a new save game, and right at the bat, this will pose a major issue for some of you. Despite hardcore requiring a new playing line, console players are still locked to just 2, so if you've used both those slots, you will need to delete one of those to use for hardcore mode. Sorry. But after doing so, you can start your game and you'll immediately be forced to take 3 negative perks from a list of 10. This will make some aspect of the game more difficult. Numbskull will have you gaining experience 40% slower. You'll have decreased carrying capacity from bad back, or even removing the ability to ask for directions just to make things insanely hard in this mode. So depending on how you specifically play Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, these are going to range from tedious to absolutely game-changingly difficult. And there's even a new achievement added for beating the game with all of these debuffs turned on. Once in game, there are going to be some background things disabled now as well. Autosaves will no longer occur, although this honestly isn't that big of a deal. Beds, major quest milestones, as well as savior snaps will still create new save points. Although, getting around the map is going to be a lot more difficult here. Fast travel is just going to be flat out disabled in hardcore mode, but more notably, you can no longer see yourself on the map. When you close and reopen the map, it'll open in the exact same place every time. You can't even use that as a clue as to where you are. You don't even have a compass giving you north, south, east, west directions anymore. The only time the compass section of your HUD will actually have any information now is when you're very close to an existing objective or location. So instead, while you're playing on the hardcore mode, you're going to have to use natural geography and basically trace the roads to figure out where your next objective is. As you do encounter NPCs, you'll have a new option to ask them for directions, which will temporarily show you where you are on the map, but this doesn't stay. The second you close the map and reopen it, that little flag will be gone. And in practice, this is a real big change up in the game. Navigation is going to take a lot longer in this mode, but I also found things to just be way more immersive. I was riding around slightly lost, and that first sight of a town is genuinely a good feeling. You could finally ask for directions again. And now, when you do arrive at that quest location, there is a larger sense of accomplishment. It felt like you had to do something to get there, and at least initially, this did feel pretty cool. But I just can't imagine that feeling is going to last. These changes are fun at first, but I just personally predict over a 50-hour playthrough, having to do this all the time is going to get pretty old. And I think particularly what you can't see just kind of sucks. You can't see your horse's stamina anymore, which I found to be one of the bigger change-ups. I didn't realize how often I was relying on this little meter. And not having those cardinal directions right at the top of your screen just felt like a little bit too much of a debuff to me. But if you're on PC, I'm sure mods will change this up and tweak it even further. Because what I think is going to be the fan favorite feature of hardcore mode are the combat and enemy AI changes, which is honestly a bit of a bigger aspect of this mode than I previously thought. And this really is coming in 2 different flavors. On one hand, enemy AI is changed for hardcore mode, so they're now going to behave differently, and you can absolutely feel this in gameplay. But of course, the changes we were more expecting is most of your HUD is gone now. You can no longer see your stamina, health, directional attack movements, this little shield and sword that would pop up for most incoming attacks, and even the rabbit tied to sneak is all just gone now. So in combat, you just have a lot less information. You'll have to determine your HP and stamina via screen effects. Stamina is easy enough, your screen will literally turn blue, but remembering or even determining how much HP you currently have is a lot more obscure now, and a lot of times it just felt like I was fighting more in the dark. And when fighting multiple enemies, combat is far more difficult. You no longer get an on-screen pop-up that someone is attacking you and that you need to block. You just have to watch your enemies' attack animations, which of course is a lot harder when you have multiple enemies attacking you at once. And oftentimes those enemies will kind of circle around and go off screen, so you end up taking a lot more hits overall, at least I was initially, because I was missing a lot more blocks than I ever would in the regular mode. But it's actually even harder than that, because even further, enemy AI was modified for hardcore, so enemies will just flank you more. It's not too bad, you can still pretty consistently keep enemies in front of you if you're constantly moving, but as you actually start to get into that combat flow, taking swings on enemies, almost immediately and constantly somebody enemy is trying to walk behind you, and you just can't let them do that. You can't let enemies get behind you because it's incredibly difficult to block those attacks. Even further, multi-enemy encounters are less forgiving. You know how in movies, only one person ever attacks at a time? Well, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 actually had a similar feature to a degree. In standard mode, enemies will pause between attacks, so one guy attacks, there is a slight pause, then the second person is allowed to attack. In hardcore mode, that pause timing was significantly lowered to the point where it's basically gone now. Sometimes in this mode, if you let yourself get out position, two enemies will be attacking almost immediately one after another. And everything just felt a bit faster. Felt like enemies could react to my incoming attacks a bit faster. It felt like they were getting attacks off even faster. I would almost describe the hardcore mode like playing with combat at 1.1 times speed. It wasn't a complete change up, it didn't become unbearable now, but I would say this is a considerable upgrade across the board. Almost every aspect of combat, at least melee combat, felt more difficult to me. And this will apply to both groups and one-on-one combat separately. Even in just a duel, when trying to just master strike my way through an enemy, it felt like the enemies would swap attack directions and then attack almost instantly. So you try and move your own weapon to try and trigger that master strike, but as you were doing that, the enemy was already hitting you in the face. The response time was a lot more narrow here. And when fighting in groups, I just felt overwhelmed a lot quicker. The simplest comparison is it feels like attacks per minute are much higher in hardcore mode compared to the standard mode. There's more enemies attacking you and they're attacking even faster than before. But overall, I found this to be a ton of fun. I think Master Strike in the vanilla game without hardcore mode is a little overpowered, but in the hardcore mode, it almost feels more just like a tool in your arsenal, something you can use from time to time, but not nearly as often. The combat overall is definitely more interesting and more difficult, but not in a bullet spongy way. Enemies feel smarter and more deadly. And I'm sure we're going to have mods later this week implementing this into the vanilla game if you don't want to use hardcore, so get subscribed for those videos. But you also might want to add a Kingdom Come Deliverance display to your wall. Displays are high quality metal posters that you can easily hang and rearrange. And they even have some really cool options for KCD, where you can have your favorite map or potentially even your favorite character on your wall in a medieval style. And some of these designs were recently upgraded with Textra, so your posters will have elevated 3D details. If you use my affiliate link down below, you can even get yourself a nice discount. Beyond the hardcore mode, several other changes are brought to the game. A new bald haircut was added for Henry at the barber's, which is simply magnificent. They rebalanced the prices for herbs from shops, so now they're going to be cheaper to buy, and you will never be able to sell an herb for more than you can buy it. A bunch of different crashes were fixed with this one, as well as that weird bug where if you downloaded too many mods, you could actually corrupt your save was resolved. This is a fairly rare bug because there's not that many people downloading a ton of mods for this game just yet, but basically your save would go to a 0 kilobyte file and as such not be accessible. It was basically wiping that save game from something to do with a bunch of mods. Thankfully that was resolved earlier today. The bugs with NPCs just wandering around after you beat the game was resolved, but sadly the bug where you lose Radzig or Henry's sword wasn't totally fixed. If you have the regular version of the sword, it'll now work fine. If you finish the game, make the right choices to get the sword back, you will still get it back. But if you do have the upgraded, the reforged version of Henry's sword, it's still going to disappear no matter what you choose at the end of the game. And that does kind of suck, as modding becomes a larger and larger part of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, a lot more people are going to be using these endgame saves. And overall, I would say this was a really solid update. It was a bit smaller than I was expecting, but the combat from the hardcore mode is honestly a bit more fun than I was expecting. The mode overall breathes a nice new life into this game. It's only a couple of months old, but it feels like an appropriate time for a new playthrough with some really custom and different things. I think quite a few people are going to be modding those features into other aspects of the game later this week, and I'm excited to see where things go in that direction as well, because a lot more is coming. Get subscribed because more updates and even DLC are just around the corner for this game.